Myles Grossman, welcome to the Coachable Podcast. Excited to have you here.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So, for those who don't know who you are, I want to first welcome you to the show because you are a dear friend who we've developed such a unique and special bond over the last, I don't know, 6 months or so.
Mm.
Um, so we're friends. You've been a client of mine, but you have personally just been on a wild journey over the last couple years, and it's been inspiring for me as not only your friend but also like a support system in your life to watch you navigate a lot of, you know, what some people would call like the hero's journey, like really just a process of just deeper and deeper awakening and healing at some of the deepest levels. And so I wanted to invite you on the show to tell your story because I know I'm not the only one who's going to be inspired by it. And there's something so cathartic and powerful about being witnessed in the in the process of telling the story that you want to tell about who you are in the world and what's important to you. And so to get started, I just want to give some context for like how we met. So, you want to tell that
Sure,
story?
yeah.
Okay, cool.
So within a couple weeks of moving to Vegas, I did not choose to move to Vegas. Vegas chose to pull me here, and now that I'm here, I'm super grateful.
Yeah.
But in the first few weeks, moved to a new place. I was in New York City prior to Vegas, did not know a lot of people here, and I was really excited to find my tribe, but I didn't know how long that would take or what that process would look like. Got dinner with a friend. He invited me to a July 4th party. Showed up to this July 4th party knowing absolutely nobody and bobbed around, met some cool people, and we found ourselves having a conversation on the porch. That wasn't a normal July 4th party conversation about, like, oh, what do you have planned for the summer?
Yeah.
This was us talking and connecting over both extremely traumatic life experiences, but in a weird way, we had a lot of ability to connect and understand each other's journeys because of the overlap and similarities.
Mhm.
So I was so grateful to be found and feel heard and understood by somebody because I feel like both of our journeys are extraordinary, not
Mhm.
the ordinary life
Mhm.
journey that most people embark on, or the average, we'll call it.
Yeah.
And so after we met, that was the start of a beautiful friendship and connection. And we've been doing a lot of deep work together.
Yeah.
We've done medicine ceremonies, breath work, all sorts of different healing modalities that you've been teaching me, and creating a space where I can heal myself and
Mhm.
learn from your experience. And I would say in the last, I guess since July, it's been like 8 months.
Yeah.
I feel like I've come a long way. I'm so grateful for
Yeah.
your role in my journey that you've played.
Mm.
And I only hope that more people can learn from the experiences that we've both had to go through,
Yeah.
so we didn't have to go through it for nothing.
For sure. I mean, I remember being on that porch that day and there just being this uh resonance between your story and mine and how like the first thing you said is like I didn't choose Vegas, Vegas chose me. That's exactly what happened to me almost 3 years ago when I was pulled into the vortex of what is Las Vegas. Like I never expected to be here. But I think that's what's so interesting when you're living life in a surrendered, open, curious state and you're choosing to let your soul be and your intuition be that guide, it will take you to some unexpected places.
Hmm.
And, you know, it was cool to see that day that like our worlds collide because it felt like it was meant to happen in some ways. And I know you had just, landed here after a lot of travel and a lot of new experiences of your own. So take us back to what caused you to leave New York because I know you had a whole life there, so many friends. From what I know about you, like you're so loved by so many. You're like always the most popular guy in the room. You have an amazing family and you had an amazing career, an amazing life. And yet you chose to leave that life and started a whole new path. And a lot of people didn't understand that. So, kind of take us back to what happened and what what made you decide to leave New York.
Yeah. So it has been a journey for
Yeah.
sure. And that journey, started November 29th, 1995. I was
Mm.
born, and now I'm 29 years old. And the first, we'll call it 26 years of my life, I felt so grateful that life came relatively easy. Had a beautiful family that I felt so grateful and fortunate to have, and amazing relationships with friends. And I felt like a lot of life was just in flow state. It was just cruising, and things were coming nice and easy.
Yeah.
And in the first 26 years of my life, I hadn't experienced true hardship to what I now understand. And I think that that made when hardship did strike a really rough awakening.
Mm.
So back in 2022, the year started off in Florida. My brother, sister, and parents were happy, healthy. My parents just got a new condo in Fort Lauderdale. We were visiting them, celebrating the holidays like we always did. And a couple months went by, and things were great. Like, I literally remember writing in my journal, life is too good to be true, and I know for sure this won't last forever. And literally a chilling month later, after that weird foreshadowing, on Friday the 13th, my little sister, who was 24 years old at the time, Hallie, was my best friend. She was my crazy sidekick partner in crime, and we did everything together. She was diagnosed with cancer. And the first couple weeks, I felt like my ears were ringing. I didn't know how to process that information. And then very shortly after, my parents and sister moved to New York City, where I was living and working, to treat her at Memorial Sloan Kettering. So they never actually figured out what type of cancer it was. It was a rare, one of one, never before seen cancer that was extremely aggressive. And so after her diagnosis in May, every single month things got worse and worse, and we didn't catch a break. And the scan results were just tragic over and over again. We just couldn't get a win. And then after a really brutal 10-month battle, she finally passed. And the craziest thing ever was she was 25 years old. It was a couple weeks after her 25th birthday. My first reaction when she passed was thank God that
Mm.
she is no longer experiencing the pain that she had been feeling while she was living.
Mm.
So I imagined her as an angel up in heaven at peace, and that gave me clarity, and that made me feel grateful that she was no longer experiencing the pain and that we no longer had to watch her through that pain.
Mm.
Now, that same month that my sister passed, we're getting ready for a 25-year-old funeral. My mom actually lost all of her vision. So within that short couple week period of my sister passing away, my mom, who had been the most incredible caretaker, supporting my sister, sleeping next to her every single step of the way, unfortunately, her stress flared up. And, they say that disease is created by dis-ease.
Yeah.
It would be really an understatement to say that my mom had not been at ease for 10 straight months, taking care of my sister, trying to fight and support her and keep that strong face on. And then we lost the fight, and my mom also had some of her own health issues that she now started to have to face. So when we thought that the medical visits were over, my mom actually then went on chemo and then lost her hair, and she was blind and struggling in so many ways. And so for a couple of months, I was living in New York City. I had the same job that I'd had for 5 years, same apartment, same group of friends, same plans on the weekends, which prior to all of this craziness happening in my life, I loved.
Mm.
But so much had changed, and I couldn't just stick around in that cycle anymore. And I knew that I needed a change to heal and take care of myself. I had on my bucket list, the top of my bucket list was I'm going to travel the world. This was before my sister got sick. This was before all of this happened. And then once we got to the point where I realized that life is so fragile and delicate and short and that it could all end like that. That was when I was like, I'm not going to keep kicking this down the road and say, oh, this is my bucket list, maybe next year, maybe next year. Like,
Mhm.
I am not waiting around anymore. I'm taking life by the balls, taking my circumstance into my own hands, and making the life that I desire happen.
Yeah, the parallels between our stories are really,
Hmm.
really crazy. I mean, because my sister was also diagnosed with cancer. She had a little longer than Hallie did. She was sick for about 2 years. And my mom was there every day, sleeping by her side in the hospital when she wasn't. And then my mom ended up getting sick too. And yeah, for the same reason. So much unprocessed grief and anger and all the things. And my mom was diagnosed with ovarian cancer a couple years later. So I watched that same progression happen within my own family, and I experienced a very similar awakening, which I wouldn't have called it that then. I didn't know what it was, but it was a shift in my perspective that said, now all of a sudden there is an urgency to live, and not just to survive and not just to walk through life, but to live intentionally. Like, what do I want? Who do I want to be? What do I want to experience? And get about the business of doing that now,
Mm-hmm.
because it just shatters your idea of this, like, of thinking your family or your life is like this impenetrable force that nothing can, you know, that nothing can penetrate and get in. And then all of a sudden you see the fragility of and the sacredness of life. And it it calls to you and says, like, what are you gonna do now that you know that?
Mm-hmm.
You know, I I, I get it. So I get it. Yeah.
When you realize that you are here for a very finite amount of time, it makes you realize that you don't have the time to waste.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like I cannot waste a single second anymore
Mm-hmm.
because I realize how special and powerful each moment really truly is.
What do you consider what how do you define wasting time?
It's a great question. So I think that there's really three resources that matter. There's your time, and then there's your energy,
Yep.
and then there's basically the opportunity cost of every moment. So any moment that you're doing something, right now I'm on this podcast, the opportunity cost of being on this podcast could be doing anything else.
Mm-hmm.
Could be traveling the world. I could be nose in, my computer working really hard. I could be having sex. I could be doing a million different things. So the opportunity cost of anything is anything else.
Yeah.
And so I realized that the opportunity cost of everything is so great that anytime you're not doing something in your absolute highest, whether it's what you're desiring, whether it's working on that thing that's the most important contribution you could be making to the world. For me, I mean, I feel like my life story in itself has so many lessons. It's just littered with these truths that I feel like my mission is to share it.
Mm.
So every moment that I'm not sharing my life story, expressing my true, authentic frequency of myself, I am not operating in my highest. And in
Mm.
that moment, maybe I'm not wasting life, but I'm not living it to the fullest and
Yeah.
maximizing everything that you could be
Yeah.
contributing.
Yeah, I love that answer, because that was one of the truths that I learned very quickly, which was that my time and my energy are my greatest assets.
Mm-hmm.
And I had always thought it was, I'd always been taught to, like, chase money and chase career goals and continue to climb the ladder. And the more uh, people liked me and the more friends I had and the social equity I had was what made my life valuable. And then all of a sudden, none of that mattered
Mm-hmm.
overnight. It was like none of what actually matters, what is actually important. And it was the time that I had with the people that I love and that I care about, and the energy in which I can bring myself to any moment and be there fully and choose to be there, versus half-assing, like being there but being completely distracted or wanting to be somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I love that answer.
There are a lot of people in this world who haven't actually thought about some of the important questions.
Yeah,
And
most
I have
people.
spent the last really 3 years thinking about those questions. And I think it's super important um, that everyone considers these things. Who are you?
Mm.
What is your purpose? What are you doing here? The answer to when is now, always. The answer to where is here. And then why? And that one you could chew on for your whole entire life, and you'll
Yeah.
never really get there. But to a lot of you guys listening, you probably know who you are in some semblance, but you might not know yourself as deep as you'd like.
Mm.
And so I would encourage you to spend some time, like, who are you? What makes you excited? What emotions do you feel? What environments do you thrive in? And so for about 6 months, after my life was completely uprooted, I spent a lot of time all by myself traveling the world, not to go get drunk and have fun and do crazy stuff, which, you know, I did bungee jump and do some things, but that was actually a spiritual experience. That wasn't about just fun and escaping. That was actually an opportunity for me to dive deep into myself and observe this mind and body in an experience that is wild.
Mhm.
And what does it look like when I look over the edge and prepare to be the guinea pig jumping off of this 450-foot bungee jumping facility? Like, that was something that most of the people in my life, when they knew that I jumped off of a bungee cord that had never been tested before in
Wait,
Bali.
tell the story because, okay, wait. To give context, did you quit your job in New York and go on
Yes.
the show? So you
Yes.
quit your job. What were you doing?
So when I graduated from school, I was so grateful that I literally found my dream job.
Yeah.
When I was in college, I knew what I wanted to do. I had been deeply inspired by Mall of America and shopping centers and entertainment and amusement parks and shopping
Okay.
developments, and said, wow, Mall of America is freaking awesome. I heard they're building the 2.0, the next iteration of this, right next to New York City. And I went to college at the University of Maryland. A lot of my friends were from New York, and I wanted to move to New York City. So I said, all right, I'm going to build Mall of America 2.0 right next to New York City. Sounds great. Got in touch, started up for 5 years, absolutely loved it. The networking, the project, the art vision of what we were creating was super powerful and felt like it was making an incredible impact on the world and all of the visitors that would get to
Mm.
come. And that was beautiful. And when my life was uprooted, I just knew I needed to step away from everything that was in this cycle and this habitual loop. So I basically went with my two best friends into the jungle. We went into the middle of the Pennsylvania rainforest, did some mushrooms in a cabin, and the next Monday I showed up to work and said, I'm giving my 1 month notice, and booked a one-way flight to Paris.
Wow.
So that was in September of 2023, about 6 months after Hallie passed away. So September, my brother and I jumped on a flight to Paris. We went to Paris, Belgium, and then I went to go run the Berlin Marathon. And my dad surprised me, and me, my dad, and my brother are in Germany celebrating at Oktoberfest after I just ran a marathon, after my sister and my dad's daughter just passed away
Mm-hmm.
and my mom was blind. And so we had the three of us living life to the fullest, smiling, happy, something that I feared might never happen again.
Yeah. Are
And
we ever
that
gonna be
that
okay
gave
again? Are we
me
ever
the
gonna be happy?
inspiration that it's like everything that we just went through, we still just had an incredible vacation. So life can still be beautiful.
Right.
So then they left after the first 2 weeks, and then the solo journey began. Switzerland, Italy, Croatia, Montenegro, and Greece in the first 5 weeks.
Wow.
Then I skipped over to Singapore and spent 4 months in Asia, which was so deep and profound and inspiring. I learned about Buddhism and Hinduism and all these different religions and
Mm.
perspectives on life. I saw people who had harsh situations different than mine. That gave me perspective and humbled me and helped me understand that I'm not poor me. There's so many people who are having hardships in their life, and you
Yeah.
can never know what somebody's going through. And so Bali felt like a really powerful turning point for me. I did a yoga breathwork meditation retreat with no technology and got really deep into breathwork, cold plunging, and I did this whole beautiful Balinese purification ceremony
Mm-hmm.
where they just cleansed my soul and cleansed my
Mm.
system. And it was really interesting to learn about um, the spiritual healing. It's not just your physical body, but how the spiritual, your chakras
Mm-hmm.
actually affect your physical health and
Mm-hmm.
vice versa.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt that and saw the ways in which I needed to heal and balance my chakras.
Yeah.
And then while in Bali, I got my scuba diving certification, diving with sharks. I was living life to the fullest, doing things that my sister would be so proud of me for doing.
Yeah.
And I was so proud of myself. And then there was this one beautiful moment where I'm driving on the side of the road and I see this tent. Wasn't sure what it was, but I decided I wanted to go explore. Turns out it was a bungee jumping facility that was under construction, that was opening 3 weeks later, but it wasn't ready to go yet. And I was like, guys, I'm leaving tomorrow. I'm not going to be here in 3 weeks. I want to try this.
Yeah.
And they're like, do you want to be the guinea pig? And I didn't even have time to think. It was like, of course. I was in the middle of Green Lights, Matthew McConaughey's book,
Uh-huh.
learning about these crazy travel stories that he experienced and felt like I needed to add to the list of stories of my life. And so I was scared, but I trusted, and I knew that my guardian angel Hallie wouldn't let something happen to me unless it was my time. So I jumped 450 feet in this bungee cord over some rocks in the most beautiful place in the world, survived, and remember the level of surrender that it took to do that. And there has never been a moment in my life where I felt more grateful just to be alive after I confronted death and mortality. And the lesson I learned from that was A, surrendering allows you to have this level of freedom that you cannot achieve elsewhere. But also, I realized that by confronting death and accepting that we will all be dead, in 100 years from now, we will all be in the ground, and many people won't even remember us or speak of our names ever again.
Mm-hmm.
And so, worrying about stuff as if we're going to live forever isn't worth it. And just trust that while we are on this earth for the allotted time that we're given, make the most of it, take those risks, do those stories, and don't be afraid of death.
Yeah.
Don't make decisions that are considering death because that's inevitable.
Yeah, I mean, I can't imagine like what was going through your mind when you're like standing on the edge of that
I
cliff?
mean, I remember it so vividly. I literally remember looking down and knowing that it wasn't in my control. And weirdly, that gave me a sense of relief
Yeah.
that it wasn't up to me, that I was just going to trust God, trust the world, trust the universe, trust myself and my story, that this is all happening for me.
Yeah.
And I believe everything happens for you. Some people get triggered when you say everything happens for a reason. It's not always a good reason. It
Right.
might be a horrible reason, but that horrible reason might be enough to be the catalyst that kickstarts your life or your community moving in the right direction, right?
Totally.
Like sometimes war is what we need to show us, hey, our system's broken, let's fix it.
Mm-hmm.
And so, Hallie didn't die for nothing.
Yeah.
We started a foundation for her. I live every single day of my life with her in mind. I feel like I take her on journeys with me. Like I
Mm-hmm.
have not just myself, but her to live for as well. And that has given me so much more meaning and significance in my life.
Yeah.
And so there's ways in which I feel super grateful that my sister passed to teach me lessons. And now I have a guardian angel in heaven. Like, not that many people can say that their best friend in the world is now in heaven guiding and helping and supporting them.
Yeah.
And so I am grateful for that. And I miss her every day and I
Yeah.
still cry and think about her. But there are things that have happened as a result of her passing
Mm-hmm.
that are beautiful silver lining lessons. And I'm so grateful for a lot of those things.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, what a contrast from what like life you were living back in New York, and then all of a sudden you find yourself in the middle of Asia, like experiencing a literally near death, like putting yourself in a near death experience, which can have its own spiritual like awakening moments of its own. Like
Hmm.
literally near death, it's like, okay, I'm coming face to face with truth.
Hmm.
Truth being our own. All of us have a limited time here, and um, that that is this like moment for so many of us if we either choose to put ourselves in that situation. Most people don't, or we're forced to be put in that situation. I mean, it sounds like a wild experience so far, and I know you had more travels that you continued on to. Something happened in Cambodia, was it?
Oh, I mean, so many things happened everywhere,
Yeah.
but Cambodia was really profound because that was a portion of the trip that wasn't really about fun. Many people don't know, but there was this awful genocide in Cambodia. So after I was in Bali, I was working on myself, and then I went to the Philippines and Vietnam and did a motorcycle tour, and I was scuba diving and having a great time. Then landed in Cambodia, learned a little bit about this genocide that had happened there, and it totally just flipped the energy of my trip. It was a lot less about having fun, and it was more about like learning about the culture and the experience and the lessons and the takeaways from the dark history. So in the 70s, there was a massive Holocaust level genocide where they killed about almost 40% of the whole population of Cambodia.
Wow.
And they burned people alive and tortured them. And it was this awful, awful period of history. And being there and meeting these happy, beautiful people whose ancestors and even some of them were alive to tell the stories was so deeply inspiring that I showed up to Cambodia after having just a great time in Vietnam. In Cambodia, I was really, really upset and struggling and having a hard time because of the struggles that they went through in their history. And then from there, it catapulted me into this extreme gratitude and this state of appreciation because it's just another reminder of how hard life can be.
Yeah.
We just had some technical difficulties on our in the podcast, and you know
Mm.
what? Like shit hits the fan sometimes. Stuff gets in the way, and you can either cry about it and let it ruin your life, or realize that if you let it ruin your life, that's your own fault for letting it ruin your circumstance.
Mhm.
And you can let hardship be the catalyst that creates pain that you can turn into your purpose, which is one of my missions. Like I
Yeah.
felt a lot of pain, and I feel like I'm turning it into my purpose. And I hope that other people, if you go through something challenging, don't let it destroy you, but realize that it can actually be the fuel to your fire and help bring you in the direction that you can actually make an impact on the world.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's you have two choices of like there's I mean, there's endless possibilities of how you can choose to see a situation, but you can see it through the eyes and the lens of fear or love, and those are kind of how I distill from all of the spiritual teachings that I've studied. It's like comes down to those two things, is fear and love. And you can see adversity and hardship and challenges and death as the end, or you can see it as the beginning of something else,
Mm-hmm.
and they're both in the same, they're two sides of the coin. Like letting go is part of that, acceptance is part of that, and then like what happens on the other side of those things. Even just what's happening collectively on a global scale, not just here in the United States, but like all of our systems are being, we're looking at what's working and what's not working.
Mm-hmm.
And that can bring up so much fear for people, but it also can bring up so much hope that's like, well, what we're doing is not working and something has to change. And sometimes that change comes through violence and comes through like a lot of chaos. And I think it's those who have connected with this deeper sense of like this higher consciousness and a deeper sense of connection to all things is that how I can find peace in the midst of chaos,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like that I can feel all of this stuff is changing around me. Nothing is quote unquote normal anymore. And I know when you were going through what you were going through, nothing felt normal. For me, when Anna died, when my mom died, when I lived through the F4 tornado, it was like I looked at my life and I was like, nothing's normal. So I don't feel normal. So how do I go back to my normal life and act normal? I mean, I don't. So something new is happening. And who is this new me that's emerging in the midst and from the rubble of all of this shit that I've
Mm-hmm.
just been through?
Yeah.
What new is being created out of all of these broken pieces? And, we can choose to see it as like, that's the end of my life. And like, and some people at that point, they kind of give up, they kind of just succumb to their pain and they just like, this is the end of what like my life could have been. And I've seen, I had a actually a client in ceremony. She sat with psilocybin and is part of her journey. She had a little cousin who she was best friends with, sort of like a sibling, come to her in her journey. And she had died, her cousin had died when they were young, and she never really got closure about it. And in her journey, the cousin said, you died when I died. You stopped living. It's time to live again. And she realized looking at her life how much she had just stopped, trying and just had kind of succumbed to that experience. She was like, everything I wore was black. She was like, I didn't realize I was like in mourning for the last like 15 years of my life. And my cousin has brought me this message that it's okay to live. It's okay to come back to my life and to choose to be in the driver's seat of it versus just being a victim to the circumstances that we find ourselves in, which we all have that temptation sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a lot there. One of the things I want to touch on is the idea of normal and abnormal.
Yeah.
And I think both of our stories are abnormal. But then you respond abnormally to an abnormal situation, and people are like, whoa. I think responding abnormally to something abnormal is normal, right?
Yeah.
Like if my sister dies and my mom goes blind and I'm going through a lot and then I might act a little abnormal, that should be expected. That should be normal. Like that shouldn't be
Right.
like, wait, I'm trying to figure it out. Why is Miles acting a little bit different? Did something change? Yeah,
Yeah.
everything fucking
Actually,
changed.
yeah.
And that's one of the things that I've been struggling with is like when my sister died, the old version of me died.
Yeah.
And I will never look at the world that I live in the same. I will never, some of the things that I used to think were true, I had a harsh reality check and I learned, nope, good people don't always get everything
No.
fairly happen to
Sometimes you
them.
pray and you don't get your prayers
Mm-hmm.
answered. And that people don't want to hear that. I
Mm-hmm.
remember having a whole existential crisis because in my faith journey, because I was like, I'm doing everything I thought I was supposed to do, and this was still the outcome.
Mm-hmm.
And yet there was a deeper truth that wanted to come, but it wasn't in the way that I thought it was going to be delivered to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of times we are only quote unquote okay or happy if we get the outcome that we desire.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the deeper spiritual lesson is that like you get what you need and that all there is perfection in all things. It might not be our preference, right? There's a difference between preference
Yeah.
and like what happened. One of my teachers says what happened and it couldn't have happened any other way because it didn't. And if it was meant to, it would have. And that can be a harsh truth, but that has brought relief to me because I realized that there's nothing I could have done to change that outcome,
Mm-hmm.
you know.
Yeah. There's nothing you could have done. There's a lot of things that you don't have control over.
Yeah.
And all you can control is what you can control. And back to another point that you talked about earlier, fear versus love
Yeah.
or fear versus faith.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, when you love someone, it can make you feel fearful because you're attached to that
Yeah.
person, you're attached to that situation. And so you're holding on to it so tightly that you're scared imagining without. And so there were moments on my traveling journey where my parents love me, but they were in extreme fear mode because they loved me so much that they were scared something might happen to another one of their children.
Sure. Trying to protect you.
So I'm traveling the world, bungee jumping, swimming with sharks, living my best life, finishing up a day feeling like I am so proud of myself. 6 months after my sister died, to be living this life and created it for myself. And I know my parents were proud of me, but they were also incredibly fearful, which affected them. And the awareness that I had of the fear that I was causing them made me feel guilt.
Mm-hmm.
So while I was on the other side of the world traveling, doing what I needed to do, unfortunately, it was really challenging for my family to know that what I was doing wasn't necessarily what's best for them.
Mm-hmm.
And so I learned so many lessons. I gained so many takeaways. I had fun. I got deep inside of myself. After the 4 months in Asia, I finished up in South America and learned some more interesting healing modalities and felt like when I returned, my hard return date was February 23rd because my sister's birthday was February 25th. So it was our first time celebrating her birthday since she had passed. So I knew when I left in September, that was the longest I could go. So upon returning in September, upon leaving in September and then returning end of February, I arrived to have a burial service for my 25, 26-year-old sister. That was the equivalent of going from the top of the mountain to like crashing. And so the hard thing for me was I felt like I had worked on myself and I had learned about myself and made so much progress. But unfortunately, I came back and I was in a really tough place.
Mm.
And I didn't have a job set up yet, and my parents were super nervous. Oh, Myles, is he going to get his shit together? I felt all this pressure from all of these people, and after I had taken care of myself in the way that I needed, the whole world was not supportive.
Mm.
And I felt like that was maybe the hardest time was the reintegration after I had learned these new lessons, evolved into this new version of myself. And all of these people I hadn't seen in months, they weren't privy to the new lessons that I had learned and the ways that I had changed. So they were expecting the version of Myles from a year or two ago to show up.
Yeah.
And they didn't really have time to process the new me that had evolved. So some of my best friends were treating me the way I wanted to be treated years before, but they didn't know who I was.
Mm-hmm.
And I hadn't had a chance to reintroduce myself. And for 3 months, I was sort of floundering. I was, still a nomad backpacking, but I was back in America. I was in New York and Miami trying to figure out where I was going to work and where I was going to live. That in-between period, after the high of the travel, in between that, trying to get my grounding and my footing was brutal, like absolutely brutal.
Yeah.
And then fortunately, Vegas called to me and brought me to this new incredible project, building, a massive development with Universal Studios right next to the Las Vegas Strip and curating it with restaurants and nightclubs and, amazing brands is something that I'm passionate and excited about. But it has been such a hard road to get here, and I still feel like I have so much work to do on myself. And I like to be positive and optimistic, and I've always been positive, and there are so many things that I'm grateful for. But I also want to point out, like, the hero's journey is not always glorious. There have been moments where I have been in so much physical pain, emotional pain, like, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Like, there have been moments where I have felt like I am deeper than rock bottom, and I have the confidence in myself to pull myself out of any situation, and I always try to find the bright side, but God, life is fucking hard sometimes. In the last 2.5 years, it felt like there haven't been many situations where I could get a break.
Yeah.
But I know that this is my destiny, and the mission that I'm on and the journey that I'm on is for a greater purpose to make a huge impact on this planet. And I look at it as this was part of the training or the gestation period to get me to become the person
Yeah.
who can spread my authentic light and my frequency with everyone.
Yeah, the like birthing process is like an arduous one. And we're talking metaphorically here, but it's the same thing. It's like a series of contractions and expansions and contractions and expansions and like brutal pain and with no like numbing agent a lot of time, and it's like something new is being born in and through me. And I don't have children, but I imagine there's, in that process of there's 9 months to build up for that. And then women go into a freaking postpartum depression after and need time to reintegrate back into society and work and social circles and all of those things because they've just been through the most intense initiation of their lives. And what you went through, what death is an initiation. When you lose somebody that close to you, when you look over the edge of a cliff and you look at your own death, like that is an initiation into the next life that you're going to live on this planet or beyond, right? And if we live well, I like to think if we live well, we will die many times, and what you've just been experiencing is like this death and this like reemergence of a new version of you that not everybody knows yet, and has not yet gotten to know. It's like I keep coming back to the baby analogy, but it's like this new baby, like friends have to come over and like meet them and get integrated and like introduced to this new this new being in the world. And it's like this new being. It's not like you're completely different. You're not the old Myles, but the old Myles is not you anymore. And I remember being in a therapy session, in a couples therapy session with my ex years ago when I was going through my spiritual awakening. I was going through what you're going through now. And I was not who I was when he and I met, and he wanted me to be who I was when we met. And that was our point of contention because I wasn't her. And I remember that my therapist looking at him and saying, she will never be that again. And you can't put Pandora back in its box. And that's a harsh reality. But what's interesting is that was probably 5 years ago. And I saw him over the holidays and he said, you know what, Tori, I didn't understand that then, but I've gone through my own awakening since then and I get it now. And I was angry with you and I resented you and I was confused by your choices and you know what I mean? What mattered to you had changed, how you wanted to spend your time had changed, what you were interested was different. And I couldn't get it. But he was like, I get it now. And that, was a beautiful coming full circle. And I hold that like intention and hope for people in your life who, because it's very common when you go through things like this that people don't get it, and they're like, but I knew you as this version, and yet for those relationships that we do hold dear, we get to, before they can say, no, I don't understand, we at least get to give them opportunity to get to know this new version of us, and say, hey, this is the new me, and it's different, but like it's more true
Mm-hmm.
and it's more real.
That is so true. And unfortunately, a lot of people don't always want the truth.
Yeah.
They'd rather be told comforting lies that make them feel warm and fuzzy inside than cold, harsh truths that might punch you in the gut a little bit.
Yeah.
And I mean, life is hard. The world that we live in today, there are many reasons to be fearful. Just watch the news. You'll
Yeah.
see a million reasons why you should be scared and nervous. And, I don't think that's the healthiest way to live, is to focus on all of the negatives. But we're human,
Yeah.
and give ourselves grace, give our loved ones grace when they're evolving and going through their own hardships. And I feel like all we can do to help anyone else is take care of ourselves and be the best versions of ourselves and offer support, but no one can fix anyone's problems for them.
No.
I've had a lot of people try to, let me just fix this for you. You know what? You're not bringing my sister back out of the grave.
Yeah.
My mom's not getting her vision back.
Yeah.
I've got a lot of fucking problems that suck, and I love you. But sometimes all I need is just rub me on my back and just give me a hug. Like, you're not going to fix it. Something you tell me isn't going to be something new that makes me say, oh, you know what? I never thought about it that way. Everything is actually okay.
Yeah. Right.
Sometimes you want somebody to sit there while you say everything's not okay and say, fuck, I can only imagine.
Yeah.
Not try
This
to
is brutal.
well, on the bright side, well, you have food in front of you, and it's like, you could be living in Africa. Yeah, that doesn't fix the problems that I'm working on.
Yeah. What has life been like in Vegas and like in the reintegration since, having this
That's a good question.
trip?
So yeah, I mean, the timeline of events, it was like May of 2022, my sister gets sick. March of 2023, she passes. September of 2023, I leave and spent 6 months traveling the world. I return at the end of February, and then March, April, and May was like no man's land. June was when I finally had some semblance of like I had a place to live. I wasn't a nomad with a backpack anymore. I was about to start a job. I was about to reintegrate with my career that I'm very committed to and start to date and, reemerge as the new version of myself. And I actually realized that since I go to New York often, going to New York is hard for me because I feel this pull of my old self. After living there for 6 years, the habits and the people that you surround yourself with, I tend to automatically go back into my subconscious for the version of myself that I was in that environment. And being in Vegas has allowed me to kind of spread the new wings that have emerged, right? Like a caterpillar turns into a butterfly, and now I feel like I'm actually able to spread my wings a little bit more in Vegas with new friends that don't know me from my past and aren't expecting me to be Myles of 2020 or 2015. Like, they understand that there's this new version, and I am really coming into that version of myself. And there's something beautiful about meeting somebody new because I get a fresh, clean slate and I can be who I want to be. All the people that have known me, it's hard to just be like, oh, all those things that you know about me, forget them and let's start over. And not that I've changed 100%, but there are many ways in which some of the closest people in my life still think I'm like this and I'm like that now.
Yeah.
And so I'm working on being more patient and graceful to give people time to adjust to the new iteration and the new evolved 2.0 Myles that I have become. And you're all going to love him. He's great. But
He's great. We love him.
it's not, I'm not fully baked yet. I'm still in the process. And you're never going to finally wake up and say, hey, I am the evolved version of myself. Like, it takes a path and the journey of becoming your higher self. And then you get there and then you realize that your higher self is still 10 years down the road.
Yeah.
So
what do you want people to know most about this new version of you that they might not know?
I will say that my new evolved, the way I look at myself is not just a human. I look at myself in 3 sections. I'm a mind, a body, and a soul. And each one of those is unique.
Yeah.
And each one of them has its own personality. Like, I can differentiate my mind saying something, my body saying something, and my soul saying something. And so I've really gotten in touch with each one of those of
Mhm.
myself.
Mhm.
I'll also say, I guess, just like many people don't really have a meaning of life or what matters to them. I think to me, like my existence it's pretty clear to me now, like what my purpose is. It's like figure out who I am and express that
Mhm.
in the freest, most genuine, authentic form. I hope that I can make an impact on the world through the lessons that I've learned and the hardships. I hope to share that with people and then enjoy it, lighten up.
Mhm.
Everything's not so serious.
Mhm.
I sometimes oscillate between everything matters so fucking much. And then there's a side of me sometimes where it's like nothing matters at all.
Yeah.
We're just a meat coated skeleton with a ghost
Floating
driving
through.
us on a giant space rock hurtling around a star.
Yeah, literally.
Like when you like, let's take a second
Zoom
to
out for
acknowledge
a
that.
minute.
And I'm worried because my boss said that I didn't do something on time that couldn't fucking matter any less. So yeah, I think putting things in perspective, I have developed the perspective to zoom out a lot.
Yeah.
So in some things that people think matter in a moment, your feelings are valid, they might matter, but I sometimes hear people think about things that they think matter that I don't think matter
Mhm.
at all.
Mhm. Yeah. It's that I think as we have an increase in consciousness and we raise our consciousness, the way I like to see it, and I think I've probably talked to you about this in some of our sessions, it's like it's the climbing of that mountain, you know, and we just see life from just a different vantage point with a little bit different of a perspective. You travel does that, plant medicine does that, death does that, falling in love does that, like so many different things. But like what I love about some of these modalities that you've been exploring, which is very much in alignment with kind of my path, has been like you come out on the other side and you just life is the same in a lot of ways, like, but you are different and the way you see it is different. And one of the commonalities that I find between people like you and I is that there's a newfound ability to zoom out.
Mm-hmm.
And I know I can feel it internally when I'm zoomed in, you know, and I'm so hyper focused on what's causing me pain. And it is in the shifting of my consciousness and my awareness and my attention and what I'm placing my attention on that allows me to zoom out and see all the things that I'm not seeing that are also part of that bigger picture.
Mm-hmm.
And when I allow that to come into the picture and into the frame versus being so hyper fixated, there's a lot of relief that comes.
Mm-hmm.
You're like, oh, my problem isn't so big anymore, you know,
Yeah.
and I am supported and I'm not alone. And yeah, the spiritual journey, man, the hero's journey is one where there's a lot of isolation
Yeah.
between I feel completely alone and no one can do this for me and it's all up to me and I have to do the work to like I'm connected with all that is and I'm one with the universe and nothing matters and this matters so much and going through those waves of emotion and understanding. And that's why I call it the great mystery.
Mm-hmm.
We're all in this great cosmic mystery. And even those of us that think we have figured something out, we don't know.
I think sometimes it's like a paradox. You figure something out, and then that helps you realize, holy shit,
I
I
don't
don't know anything.
exactly.
And
Exactly.
so it's humbling
Hmm.
to learn something just to be shown how much more you don't know,
Yeah.
and that you could either spend your life seeking that knowledge, or you could also be happy and say, you know what, I'm never going to learn everything, and I don't need to,
Hmm.
and life will take its course.
Hmm. Yeah. And there's no wrong way to play it. It's
Hmm.
like your game. How do you want to play it? We talk about the coachable podcast being the
Yeah.
game of life. And if we're in a simulation and this is all a video game, it's like maybe you get to come back and try again.
Yeah.
Who knows? But like play your game the way you want to play it based on, and I think as we go through the levels and have the different experiences, you might play with a new strategy,
Hmm.
And that's what I've found. And I think, it seems like you've found yourself on a similar path.
For sure. I think, we've both kind of committed to take the red pill.
Yeah.
There's the red and the blue. And if you take the blue pill, you get to hear all these comforting lies and you get a nice, easy life. The red pill is you are shown all of the harsh truths and the realities. And a couple weeks ago, I tried ayahuasca, and that was textbook red pill. It wasn't fun. It wasn't glorious. I mean, you see some crazy stuff, but that was actually to show me the dark, real things hidden in the nooks and the crannies of myself and the world. Um, and that is not fun to see,
Mm.
but it is so informative
Mm.
and it will help you understand the world to a much greater degree. And I don't think there's a right or wrong way, but I think a lot of people choose their path.
Yeah. This is the game that we're playing is one of know thyself.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the question that you said at the beginning is
Mm-hmm.
like, who am I? And it's the quest to learn more about ourselves every day and you use what we learn in our lives
Mm-hmm.
and to show up as who we are in the most authentic, true way possible as we learn to be brave and have the courage to keep taking the masks off, even when we pick them back up,
Mm-hmm.
because
Yeah.
we will. And it's not about perfection in any way. That it's just about pursuing truth, your truth, and
Mm-hmm.
then universal truth to whatever degree we can find it.
Yeah. Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Close your eyes. 100
Okay.
years down the road, you're on your deathbed and you're smiling, looking back on the glorious life that you've lived.
Mm.
What is your metric of success?
Mm. I didn't betray myself.
Mm-hmm.
And then I loved myself enough to to do the things that needed to be done, to do the things that I wanted to do, and to not let the hard things in life cause me to close my heart, to still love without, yeah, to live my life without withholding love from myself or those around me.
Beautiful answer. I
Yeah.
love that.
What about you? Close your eyes.
I want to know that I dug deep to discover my truest self and expressed him freely, have no regrets, and to have just shared and expressed as much light and love as possible.
That's it, man.
Your answer actually brings something up for me that, I mean, there's a lot that I talked about, and then there's something that I haven't even discussed yet in this podcast. But back in April, I started seeing somebody really special. And she had cancer. She had stage 4 cancer for 6 years when we met, and we had known of each other and we had talked on the phone, but we finally met in April.
Mm.
And we had a really deep, special connection, and we found ourselves spending a lot of time together for a few months before she passed in October. And while I was seeing this girl, and no one could understand the connection we had, the way that we understood each other in ways other people couldn't. I saw my sister in her. She healed me. I healed her. We added light and love into each other's lives. But almost everyone that I spoke to, their advice was run. You're already so vulnerable. You just lost your sister. Your mom's blind. You shouldn't start seeing somebody who has an uncertain future. And I could have listened to those people.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Rachel unfortunately passed. If I listened to those people, I would be kicking myself in the nuts for having missed out on the opportunity to enjoy her presence. And so, against a lot of the advice of people that I love and that were looking out for me and wanted to support me, they didn't know what was best for me. They didn't realize that I was trying to avoid pain. I wasn't. they were trying to help me avoid pain when I was actually trying to confront it and
Mm.
be my true authentic self, which was support and be there and be in this relationship.
Mm.
And so what you said was don't betray yourself and be true to yourself. And I'm grateful that I trusted myself enough to continue doing something really hard,
Yeah.
even though it could have hurt me, and it did. But that whole situation taught me so many beautiful lessons about life, and I wouldn't change a thing.
Mm.
And so I think, hopefully we can all say on our deathbed, somebody might have given us advice that's good or bad. Listen to yourself at the end of the day, because you know what you need, you know what you want, and you know how to support and take care of yourself.
Yeah. No one can tell you what's best for you, and I think the work that we're doing is about learning how to trust yourself enough to listen to that inner voice, especially when it doesn't make sense to anyone else.
Hmm.
And to me, that is to live that way in a world where it's always trying to tell you who to be and what to do. That's like a really brave thing to do. And so I see that in you, and I honor that in you because it's not easy. And um, yeah, it's your life, man, and I'm so proud of who you are and this version of you that I get to know and love and be close to and watch you, do this work. And it gives me so much hope and inspiration for the men in our community and the men around the world that you are an example for men of like what it looks like to really confront yourself, to look in the mirror and to ask the hard questions and to do the work that most people never have the balls to do. So thank you for being an example of what that looks like. And I love you and I appreciate you for being on and sharing your story.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for all of the time and energy and love and support that you've given me over the last however many months. We have a lot more work to do together.
Yeah.
Your story has been so inspiring to me. I hope all of my followers get to learn more about Tori, because she is a textbook example of somebody who's been through the ringer and could have let it fold her, but instead it made her stronger and able to make a more positive impact on the world. And that is a very much aligned with my mission.
Yeah.
So let's keep making the
Do
world a
it.
better place and keep letting people know it's okay to have a really hard day if something fucking terrible happens to you. And the worst thing you could do is try to fake a smile and not take care of yourself and give yourself what you need, because you're trying to give the world or your job or your friend what you think they might need.
Yeah. Yeah. Amen. I love that. I
Hmm.
hope and know that, Miles' story inspired you as much as it does me. And if it did, I invite you to share this with a friend or somebody who might need a little bit of hope in their life, who's going through a hard time, that it does get better. And there is, life after tragedy. He and I are both examples of that. So, love you guys. Thanks for being here. We'll see you next week on the Coachable Podcast. Bye.
Love it.